Greetings. This is episode 318 of the Outback Mind Podcast. Thank you so much for joining in. Wow, some amazing feedback from the recent podcast with Pete Bates. If you haven't listened to that one, please jump in and have a listen or watch on YouTube. Pete spent a long time in prison and came out a better man. Really inspiring, incredible story, but also highlighted a lot of the trauma that Pete went through as a child, and unfortunately, it's something which touches many people, not just men, but everyone in general. And it's how we manage our way through challenges and come out the other side that really matters and makes a difference. Pete chose to do something differently, and he was fortunate that things lined up once he did get to a position of feeling a little bit better about himself and being able to be a bit more proactive with his life and everything that presented for him. So yeah, I won't give too much away on that one, but please jump in and have a listen. We're going to completely shift gears today. I have a wonderful man from America by the name of Ian Morris on with me. Ian's had an incredible personal journey himself. Was able to heal through frequency healing, so sound and vibration. It's something that I'm pretty passionate about because I know if we can get the right frequencies and tuning into our own body, it can incredibly change our mental state, but also the way we feel about ourselves as well. Ian creates some amazing music and shares that throughout the world. And we're going to talk about what Ian's doing to help out the Outback Mind to help more Australians to be able to access frequency healing and to be able to take control of their mental well-being by using sound as a pathway to heal. So really looking forward to discussing that more broadly in the conversation with Ian today, and also hearing a bit about his own personal journey and how, frequency healing and sounds really helped him. So I'm sure you're going to enjoy this chat. If you haven't already, please follow the Outback Mind Foundation on social media. And also, if you haven't subscribed on YouTube, please do. Please share it with some friends. And just be really curious about this conversation with Ian today. We're going to go quite deep. We're going to talk about, what it is that humans connect with when it comes to vibration and music and healing. And this isn't something which is new. It's been happening within ancient Egypt. It's been happening with Indigenous Australians. It's something which is incredibly powerful, and we're trying to close that back in a little bit more and make it more accessible to people by using tools and technologies like Ian develops to be able to reach more people in general. So I'm sure you're going to get a lot from this chat. If you've got any feedback, please send us a message or email support@backmind.org.au. All right, strap yourself in. It's going to be a good one. Ian, welcome to the Outback Mind Podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, man.
Whereabouts are you in the US at the moment?
I'm in Pennsylvania. I'm about 20 minutes from Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. It's a big Civil War battlefield here in the US, so a lot of people know where that's at, but that's where we currently are right now.
Mm, I'm just trying to picture what Pennsylvania was actually famous for when I was a kid, but it reminds me of the Count off Sesame Street. I think he was from Pennsylvania, wasn't he?
Transylvania, I think. But
Something
yeah.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, there's so much nature here. It's a lot of green, and there's a lot of the state's pretty big, and there's a lot of really neat uh, geographical highlights. Nice mountains, waterfalls, nature reserves and things like that. But yeah, it's pretty neat place,
Wow.
especially in the spring and the summer. It's really beautiful.
There's probably a lot of people listening to this that haven't been to America or the US, but I have a couple of times, and I was really blown away by how nice it is. We only hear about all the chaos and you know
Yeah.
we see a bit about the basketball and things like that, but other than that, people are really disconnected probably with how beautiful America actually is.
Yeah, I think it's always interesting. People who travel, like the world travelers, were always, well, they'll comment a lot on the people they meet being so nice, and a lot of the things that they see in the different countries are very different than what the news or, you know, uh, the portrayal of it and the news media is very different, and so I think it is neat to connect with people and to kind of feel it for yourself. So it's cool that you got to come over here and check things out.
Yeah, and one thing you touched on there on how nice people are. Like I was there in February and I had a guy come to an Airbnb that I was staying at and he knocked on the door and he said, "Can I come into this?" And I said, "Yeah, yeah, no worries at all, mate." And the first thing he said to me was, "Thank you for your kindness." I've
Oh,
never heard anyone say that before. Like and he's a young guy. Like, that's just beautiful communication, which makes you feel
yeah,
good. And I notice that a lot throughout America. People are very kind and obliging. So
yeah, that's
yeah.
cool. Yeah, I think not all of America is that way, but I think there are a lot of really great people here and great pockets of geographic locations that have some really awesome, kind-hearted people there. Yeah.
Amazing, and we've got them here too. Don't worry. But I think yeah, it was really surprising to see younger people, being so nice, and I hope that's going to potentially be a way of the future in Australia because we need more people that are working with that frequency rather than an aggressive frequency.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
So tell us a bit about Ian. Like a lot of people wouldn't know of you, but obviously I want to know a bit about your journey as a young man and sort of the life that you got thrust into and what that sort of looked like for you, perhaps.
Yeah. Well, I was really fortunate that my mom and dad were kind of hippies, so I got exposed to a lot of art and music, and especially music. Just, I remember growing up, my dad had a vinyl collection of about 2000 plus records. And my mom made a joke and said that when they were younger, because they got married at 18, I think they had me, I was the firstborn, they had me when they were like 26. So between like when they were younger, like 18 to 25, like they were just, coming up in the world trying to make their way. And mom said that mom was a budgeter. She would budget things and, money and just really had things allocated. And so she said that my dad would save his lunch money for the whole week, not eat lunch, and then he would go to the record store and buy records. And she just laughed, thought it was so funny. And he would just, she said that he ate that, like he ate the music. He just sat down, digested it, looked at all the art and all the people who were playing on it, learned so much about the music. And it's like when we're younger and my mom's telling us those stories, you don't really understand. And then as you get older and you start finding your passions, everyone has different things that they're into. But for me, it was definitely poetry, music, and art that really lit me up and got me excited. And so I was lucky that I had an upbringing where I was subjected to a lot of different styles of music. Like, I had a friend the other day, is like, well, what kind of music, were you subjected to? And I said, well, like Jean-Luc Ponty, Frank Zappa, the Beatles, Led Zeppelin, but then also like John Prine and, everything from like Miles Davis and John Coltrane to, Appalachian music and fiddle music and just tons of classical and just jazz, Tower of Power, Spyro Gyra, just Weather Report, all of these amazing bands. And so it was just something that I think was in my blood. And how I came into this was I got sick, I got, ill. And my whole life I had played baseball from t-ball to high school. And when I was in high school, I had college and professional scouts that were coming to my games. And the thing that made me different or stand out a little bit, I think, was I could pitch. There was games where I would pitch like a two-hitter, and then I would have 14 strikeouts as a pitcher, and then I would go to the plate and be 3 for 4 and have 2 home runs. And so pitchers don't really hit like that. So there was a lot of scouts that were looking at me. But when I was in 11th grade, I had this situation that came up in a game where I passed out I was running, I hit the ball and I was running the bases, rounding first and going to second base, and I just passed out, like hit the ground. And they took me to the hospital and they did a, test, and they basically said that I had a mitral valve prolapse, which is a valve issue with the heart, and then I had an arrhythmia at the same time, and so there was like oxygen that had got cut off from my brain, and I just passed out. Well, when that happened, all the scouts were just like, "He's broken." They just left. I was just like garbage now. And so I think that always was really hard for me to digest. And so I started hanging out with the stoners and the drinkers and the musicians. And so I was like smoking weed and drinking. And I, remember as a older, as I've grown up, I've had these conversations in retrospect with my mother. And we were talking about how back then I would drink and not try to kill myself, but I would drink to the point that I just hope I didn't wake up, because I was so let down that my entire life I had this dream and this goal to become a professional athlete. And it was just taken away in a moment's notice. And you just go through this identity crisis of, who am I now without this thing that I've put hundreds and thousands of hours into? And so, life and the universe and God has this funny way of putting you in the right place, even if you're not always making the right decisions. And so, hanging out with those drinkers and stoners and musicians, I got subjected to music. And, I started playing music again. And I remember my dad was a musician. He's like, "Oh, you like music now?" So he was like real excited about it, because he was like, so at about 17 years old, I started playing guitar, and that was the first time I picked it up. And that's not true. I picked up the bass guitar first, and that lasted about 4 weeks. And then I was like, I want to go to the guitar. I want to I want to play the guitar. So I started picking up the guitar and went through that, and then the rest, they say, is history. I just never looked back. I play 28 instruments now. I love writing poetry, painting, visual artist. I stretch my own canvases and, paint, and just, I love anything creative. And it really became a passion of mine. And honestly, I don't know if I ever would have found this if I hadn't gone through that identity crisis, and that kind of first dark night of the soul, was really that. And so that led me to music, and then that eventually led to me where I had gotten sick a second time. So this was kind of like, I always say, my second dark night of the soul, like phase two, where I was diagnosed with MS and colon cancer in 2012. And I went through this really big uh facing my shadow, and the dark night of the soul, which is, I'm either going to die, from what they're telling me, or I'm going to get better. And I don't really have the money to do the treatments that they were wanting me to do. So I made up my mind, like, I'm going to do everything I can do to learn about holistic health and to learn about meditation, sound healing, breath work. And that's what I did. I just went down that path for about a year and a half and just really gave my life to it. It was what I would wake up, I did it for lunch, for dinner. I just went on to a full commitment to that lifestyle, and it led to healing the cancer, healing most of what I was dealing with MS, because now we know that MS mostly is started from parasitic infections. And that's a big start. Some people will try to say no, but if you look at a lot of the holistic doctors, they're saying yes, cancer and MS and a lot of these issues are coming from parasitic infections. And so I started learning about herbs and different health remedies like Pio d'Arco, a tree bark from South America that you can use to, help a lot with infections, candida overgrowths, STDs, cancer. I mean, it just goes on and on of things that it helps. And so these are the types of, things that were coming into my awareness. People, the universe was putting people on my path that were giving me books and, connecting me with the knowledge that they knew. And I just became a sponge of trying to learn as much as I could. And that's really what led me into where I am now with running, listening to Smile. It started off doing just yoga studios. People would say, "Hey, the music you made that helped yourself, could you bring that to my yoga studio?" And I said, "Sure." And then it just kept growing. People, I remember the fifth one that we had, we sold out the yoga studio, couldn't get any more people in, and we did two back to back, and both nights they sold out. And it just, from there, it just kept growing, where people in different states in America and different countries started reaching out after they saw our events on Facebook. And it just really took off. It was something that I never intended to run a company. It wasn't something I set out to do, but it found me. And so I joke about that a lot. I'll say I'm not the founder; it founded me. And so, but yeah, it's been a journey for sure. And so that's a little bit about that
Wow.
story, I guess.
Yeah, mate, amazing. And look, it's very relevant and important that people get these roadblocks. Most people go the other way rather than moving through it and forward and being curious about change, and what you mentioned, what happened in 2012, I went through a major transformation at that time, or probably 2009, but 2012 is when things really shifted, and I went to study nutrition, and I saw this wasn't quite right, and I went and studied holistic nutrition, and I thought, well, I can see all these wonderful things that are happening. Why isn't this spoken about more broadly in modern
Yeah.
society, rather than, the reactive rather than the proactive? And yeah, so people like yourself healing, older people which were thriving, sharp and all these sorts of things. And yeah, it really amounted to healing dysfunction rather than suppressing dysfunction, I guess, at the end of the day. And I was sent like all these books which were written in the 20s and 30s and all that. And sort of getting back to the core of it all. But I think a lot of that wisdom was sort of, potentially blocked and taken away. So yeah, I was very fortunate to find that pathway. But yeah, like it was it finding me rather than me finding it too. It all sort of came. And I think a lot of people are very confused with life and their own unique journey, but I believe everything happens to us for a reason. It's a matter of how we deal with that rather than being so reactive to everything, I guess, in general.
Yeah. I just want to speak on one thing that you said there. Some of the people I really like a lot is like Florence Scovel Shinn and like Neville Goddard. And you start listening to these guys talk. Neville was like in the late 40s and early 50s, I think. And then like Florence Scovel Shinn was like in the 1912 or something like that, out 1920 maybe, I don't know, in that time period. And so you look at the knowledge that was brought through with these people, and you're just like, wow, this is like, so like, can you imagine, Fallon, my partner, and I will have conversations like, can you imagine being someone in the 20s and like hearing this for the first time, like back then, because now we have all this evolution and all this, these self-help masters and books and all these things that we're subjected with. So it's kind of like, yeah, I connect with this information looking back in the past, but I can't imagine someone in 1912 getting information about like the new, the ascended masters and like, just all this information. So it's just so wild how there was definitely, it seems to be some kind of block that was trying to stifle that information from coming out. But as we see, the truth can only be held down for so long, and it keeps coming.
You're right, and that's another podcast in itself as to why a lot of that wisdom was taken away
Yeah.
by other motives and so forth. And yeah, people are starting to come back to yeah exactly what it is. And I had a relative that's just gone through the cancer treatment, but really, as you mentioned, it's probably come from a parasite infection, which was enhanced by sugars and all different sorts of things. But taking that away rather than just continuing to use it and then using chemotherapy is probably not, the ideal pathway for the body, perhaps, to heal.
Yeah.
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 Amazing, mate. Yeah, look, there's a hell of a lot in that in general, but more importantly, what we need to talk about on this podcast is I become more aware of frequency healing probably over the last 10 years. It all started with me when I went to a Kundalini yoga class in New York, actually. And at the end
Hmm.
of that class, they had gongs, and it was like everything shifted within myself, and the mind was completely gone, and it was like I was in this frequency of bliss, and I believe my body and everything became coherent for the first time in a long time. Um,
Yeah.
that sort of got me really curious about sound and how sound was doing so much more to us than what we were just taking in, through our thoughts and our connection, rather than what it actually does to us, from a physiological point of view.
Yeah. It's I remember the first time that I listened to a binaural beat on the headphones, that I could feel a tear running down my face, and I was like not emotional. I wasn't crying, but I could tell my body was releasing pent up energy and stagnant energy. And so the more that I listened, I remember calling my mom. I must have been in my mid 30s, and having a conversation where I said, I met peace today. Like the first time I can really say that instead of my mind consuming me, because I'm a creator and I'm just highly creative, my mind is always wanting to go do something, create something, have some kind of movement. And it was always hard for me to sit still. And I was not a person that could meditate. And when I introduced the frequency, the binaural beats, I remember I felt like I was sitting in the quiet of a storm. Like I could, feel all the thoughts and all the desire to like get up and do stuff and create stuff, and it was trying to pull me out of meditation, but it's like it didn't have an effect on me because the frequency was grounding me so well that it left me sitting where I was in the quiet of the storm. And I remember just crying, like weeping, where this emotion was able to move out of me because I actually could sit still. And I think it was the realization of like, wow, this is what people do. Like, this is what meditation is. And so, yeah, it really was one of the first things that, really made me see the difference that frequency can make, and made me really become a lifelong student of this.
Yeah, absolutely. And geez, I tell you what, like, there's so much in it. I think most people in Australia connect to music, which is popular or whatever, or it's related to a time in their life or an emotion or whatever it may be. We might term it as yang music, like it's hyped up sort of music, rather than parasympathetic music, which takes us into a state of feeling fluent and in a place of fluidity. Um,
Yeah.
and I just I'm really curious to explore, when we get into our parasympathetic nervous system, how that actually relates to what can happen with binaural beats and other frequencies, which can really help that inner connection and that reformation of our emotions, I guess.
Yeah. Well, so one of the brainwave states I really like to target the most with our binaurals is the theta state. And the theta state is what you hit just before REM sleep. It's one of the most highly relaxed states. You're kind of in between, you're in that fluid between being conscious and moving into like a unconscious, kind of sleepy state. And so a lot of practitioners like to work with theta pattern because you can reprogram. It's a highly reprogrammable state of mind. So a lot of people can actually learn in that state, and they can also break habits in that state. So we work with like addiction counselors that love that theta pattern. We have, psychologists, we have life coaches, just different people who are really practitioners that really like to explore what tool theta pattern can play with binaural beats. And I think that it also matters the practitioner that you're working with too, because they know the cadence and they know the vocabulary and they know the timing that they're really searching for to really help the individuals break patterns and to really create new habits in that brainwave state. So it's a lot of fun to explore that with individuals and practitioners.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the sort of literacy which most people I believe in our country are probably not aware of. And
Yeah,
that's I believe, going to be something which we can work on in the future to get that out there more so people actually understand.
yeah.
When we're feeling calm and in this like joyful state, what would that be sort of relating to, like a theta sort of brainwave, do you think?
Well, so yeah, so what's interesting is like 7.8, I'm sure you're familiar with like the Schumann resonance, right? So the Schumann resonance, just for people who don't know, would be a basic understanding would be the electromagnetic pulse of the earth, like the heartbeat of the earth.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of studies that show that our conscious brain activity is at about the same activity as the heartbeat of the earth. So that 7 to 10 hertz in that range is a really active part of us being grounded and connected to earth, and then also just our functioning mind is operating at about that same hertz, right? So it's interesting because when you start looking at a lot of religious places, as far as like spiritual places like the Malta caves and just different ruins that, used to be a part of rituals and in different cultures. Um, when they go in and they start doing acoustic testing of these facilities, they're finding that between 110 and 111 hertz is what they're coming back with. And what's interesting is they've done studies with 110, 111 hertz, and they show that it really helps to facilitate letting go of anxiety and also depression. Those are two of the emotional states that are helped to move that stagnant energy. So it's really interesting to start seeing the culmination of all these different frequencies that you're hearing about and then learning the science behind them and how it relates to this could be a tool, this could be a modality that could really help you with your self-care practices, your meditation, your breath work, and just relaxation before bed, the downshifting before bed.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. Well said. It's interesting. I didn't realize that there was a connection with, say, the Malta Caves or the tombs in Egypt or the pyramids in Egypt or other places. When I did the introduction to this podcast, I talked about, this is technology which has been around since man was created, but we
Hmm.
really lost our way, in general around it. But really, the indigenous or the ancients knew it, know it, but modern society, because we've been we're so pushed into our sympathetic way of living and our survival mode that we've become really disconnected from getting back to those feelings again,
Yeah, yeah.
When you walk into a supermarket and you hear this music, where does that relate to with regards to what's going on with us, internally?
Well, I think what's interesting, I mean, at the risk of sounding like a conspiracy theorist, I think what's interesting is that frequency is being utilized against you or with you on a daily basis. And what I mean by that is when you go to a sporting event and they play the hype music after someone scores a goal, dun 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 dun, they're using this beats per minute and this activator, this amplifier, this music to get the crowd ignited, fired up, and to cheer for the home team, right? But it's the same thing that's happening in a movie when the love scene comes on and they're trying to pull tears out of you or compassion for the main characters and they want to move you. This is frequency that's being used, against you or used to help you enjoy this moment. But then it's the same thing like when you go to a store, the advertisements, they know the colors, the frequencies of the colors that are going to make you make a purchase. They know the frequencies that they need to play on the speakers to get you alert and aware of, they know what height the tags of for sale need to be. They already have studied the psyche of the whole human behavior of interaction of commerce and sales, right? So it's all being used against you. So if we know this to be true, I mean, you can do some sort of surface investigation and you can see that this is the case. My invitation to people is always, there's two sides to every coin, right? So, just like I can eat food that can really degrade my body, I can eat food that uplifts it and heals it, right? So sound is no different. We have the unconscious digestion of sound and media, and then we have the conscious, awareness and the elevation and the amplification that these things can bring just by choosing better, making better decisions about what we're feeding our body in all ways, not just the food, but the friends we hang out with, the company that we're keeping, the media, the books, the movies that we're taking in. Are these all things that are adding to our life and giving us positivity? Or is this stuff that we're um, unconsciously digesting that's having an effect on our vibration internally in a negative way, you know?
Yeah, yeah, well said again, mate. And I don't, yeah, I just don't know whether people are aware of it, or we're curious enough to really sort of dive into this. And I know our conversation today will definitely reach a lot of people and help them on that curiosity pathway. But um, it's something that, what would you say that a natural state of being would be for a human? Like what is our natural state? I believe we're meant to be calm and peaceful, which is a high vibration. If you look at a scale of consciousness, peace is really the highest, isn't it? I guess at the end of the day, and fear is the lowest.
Yeah.
So that peaceful, calm state is naturally who we are, but it's a matter of investing in ourselves to get back to that place again on a daily basis. And I think people now, because we're so dominated and stimulated, we need to combine that with something or a tool which can get us to that, that state.
I think what's interesting is like the playfulness of being a child we lose, along the way because we move into the expectations of society, of our parents, of people around us, family, friends, you should be doing this, you should be doing that. You should have been a doctor. You should have been a lawyer. All of these things that get projected onto us. And it's like, I think what I have seen is that we are meant to be creators, not consumers, and we've been tricked, duped into being consumers exclusively almost. And I think that we are supposed to be creators. Our brains and our hearts are resonant with the creative energy and that childlike energy, and we lose that because we're told that we need to grow up and get real and be realistic and all of those things. And I think that if when I talk to people, I've had people on podcasts ask me, what's the number one thing that you would suggest, someone start with? And it's always for me mindset, because, you can give people the correct food, the right books, all the proper tools to help make the transition. But if their mindset is not passionately, enveloped in the solution or the resolution, they're just not going to achieve it. And so I think like meeting people where they are instead of preaching or talking down to them is the best way to reach people, is to say like, hey, I've been there, I know it's tough, I know you're struggling, I know it doesn't make sense, I know this doesn't seem like this could really work. But I'm going to bring up Neville Goddard here. I think this is something I constantly come back to. Neville Goddard says that worry is a habit, but so is faith. And
Mm.
so, when you just take that one line, you realize like it's all the same energy. It's just where I'm feeding it. You've heard the story about the wolf, which wolf are you going to feed? And it's very similar to that. And another thing that Neville says that I love is he talks about when you move a room of furniture around. He said it always looks so chaotic when you start moving it around and, breaking down the room. And he said sometimes you're halfway through and you look at the room and you're like, what in the world? This is the biggest mess. What am I going to? And he says, but when you get through the end of it and it's all resituated, you're like, wow, this is so much better. And he says that us as humans, we try to block God and the universe from moving the furniture because we think, no, I've got to, this chair has to stay right here. It's got to be, this is where it's always been. This is where it's got to stay. And he's saying, listen, don't dam the flow. Don't put a dam in the middle of the flow. Let the flow come. And he says when we start damming the flow, we start telling God and the universe that we know better than he does. And so he says once you surrender and you trust, he said that's really what this is all about, is the trust and the surrender. He says the furniture gets moved around and then sometimes it's 100 times better than you could have ever dreamed, but you just had to get out of the way. And I think that that's one of the biggest things that I've had to learn with this, even as a creator of this music. Like I've shared this story before. I'll make this quick and we'll wrap this up. But basically there's times where I was working on a piece of music and I had it, as a creator, I was like, had a direction I was wanting to go with it, and my computer would crash. And then when I got it booted back up, all the parts had been moved around. Like the music had been moved around. And I remember being really frustrated, like, man, what in the world is. And then I would hit play and I was like, oh, okay, well, I guess that's what we were supposed to do here. And so it's like you start learning these little things. And I think the universe, when you start playing with it, it interacts with you. It's wanting from you trust, childlike creativity, and trust. And I think that it's hard to do that sometimes in this world. But the more community and friendships that we can find that support us in that journey of moving into that space, it's going to always set us up for success.
Spot on. That's exactly right. And
Mm.
oh, it's hard to get out of your own road, but you've got to get out of your own road for the magic to happen, at the end of the day, because we become, suppressed and really tight with our lives. But this letting go and this freedom and just that joyfulness, that wonder, that awe can take us into a place of opportunity, because the
Yeah.
opportunity gets shut down when we're in this reactive state. And we've got to retrain ourselves and rework ourselves back into a state of acceptance and forgiveness, which can take us to a pathway of feeling, joyful again, I guess, at the end of the day, because that's really a natural way of being, I guess. And so many people go through suffering, but few get out the other side and start to live life from a place of acceptance and joy again. But yeah, this is where we've got a job to turn society around, because we've just got to remember it. What we already know. It's just a matter of letting go enough to remember, so we can bring in the good stuff again. Which is really important.
Yeah.
But yeah, look, if people have lived in a place of hardship, or they've lived in a place of like tough times and that, you can always remember and relearn and reskill, and it just takes time and courage and commitment to yourself to do it. I believe
Yeah.
you would have examples of people that have probably been traumatized, and frequency and that's probably helped them. Have you got any examples of some people like that, perhaps?
Yeah, for sure. And I think before go there, I'll make this quick. But I remember Tony Robbins was talking at one of his seminars. It was actually I'm Not Your Guru, that movie that he did for Netflix. There's a scene in there where this woman was really upset about her dad being a drug addict. And I'll never forget, like, where he starts telling her all these positive traits about herself. And she's like, yeah, I can see that. And then he said, but, your dad is part of that equation. The person that you're so frustrated at, because of his example not being what you wanted it to be, you strived to be better, and you became stronger from that hardship that you endured. So he's like, you're here cursing your dad, but you should also be thanking him and forgiving him, because you love the person who you are today, and that would not be possible without that block, that stagnant energy that was there, that was that resistance that helped you, turn into a diamond. You know what I
Mm.
mean? And so I just remember that, and I see that in my own journey with my father. There was, some things that we went through emotionally that was really tough for me, but I also love the man that I'm becoming today, and I know that a lot of that came from from those trials and tribulations, of like going through all of that. um but yeah, I would say that one of the biggest that stands out to me was there was a woman who was actually friends with my uncle, and she contacted me and said that my uncle told her, to contact me. Her son was 16 years old. He was in a wrestling accident. So her son got picked up by the opponent over his head, and then he dropped her son on his head and broke his neck. And he was only 16 years old. And she was in tears when we were talking, and this had just happened, and she was having a hard time. He was told that he was going to be quadriplegic for life, that he wasn't going to have bowel or bladder functions for life, and that it was going to be a really big struggle. And so when she contacted me, she said, "Uncle, your uncle said that you had some frequencies, that might possibly help." And so I basically told her, I said, "This is really heavy what you're going through. And I just want to take a pause to say, we're sending you love. And I'm really sorry that you guys are going through this." And I said, "But now what I will say is, if you guys can hold space for your son, because he's unable to do that right now, but if you can hold space around your son and visualize him walking again, and hold that vibration and use this music to amplify that intention, I believe that's where miracles happen, and I said, I'm not a doctor. I can't tell you that this is going to work, but I have seen miracles happen, and I know that this is what it takes is you guys cannot give up hope, and you have to shower him with visions of him walking again and speak into this. You have to hold that space and really believe that it's possible, and ask God for a co-creation and healing." So we started, and she, started off with a joke, which I thought was really, um, heartfelt. She said, "He can't move his arms and legs, so he has no choice. I'm going to put the headphones on him, and he's going to listen to this music, right?" And so we kind of, chuckled a little bit, and then she proceeded to just become a beast and learning about frequency. She would ask questions. We would, talk in emails and text messages. We gave her some free albums. She bought a bunch of albums. We put together a playlist for her that she used. And so she was listening to the music with her son 3 hours to 4 hours a day. She started saying that within the first few weeks, he started moving his fingers, getting some movement in his toes, just barely. I think within the first month, he sat up in the bed, assisted. And then he started doing some other therapies where they would throw like tennis balls, and he would barely be able to throw it. But slowly but surely, over the next 8 months, he got to the point where he walked out of the hospital on his own. And one of the things I told her is, I said, it's different when this happens to an adult. When a child that's 16, I said, the body is resilient. It wants to heal. And I said, you just have to give it the visualizations and the energy and the frequency for that to take place. You cannot give up hope. You have to believe that you are the one that will be different, that will defy the diagnosis. That's where the miracle is going to come from. And so, sure enough, he's living a normal life today. She's about to give us a testimonial, on this whole thing that's just recently happened within this last year. It's just been, thing after thing, watching people with diabetes, with cancer, dyslexia, having breakthroughs. And the other one that I'll bring up is there was a young girl that we worked with that was a nonverbal autistic child. And over about an 8 month period, we got it to where she verbalized. She made, slowly made her way into transitioning into a public school system, which she was not able to do before, and just had a lot of breakthroughs on an emotional level with frequency music. And it was just something that was just really just an honor to watch like these breakthroughs with people. And so yeah, this is we work with clients and what I call personal frequency coaching, and then we also do group sessions, and we do like what I call sonic meditations, which is audio, sound bass with frequency music. And it's a little different because most people are doing it with singing bowls and gongs, but we're using pre-recorded music, and we're using subwoofers and large speakers. The whole room vibrates, the floor vibrates. It's something that is very, very powerful. And then what's neat is that you actually get to take the music home from the experience, which a lot of these situations you don't get that. And for 10 years, we made an album every single month that was in alignment with the astrology for that month. So we looked at human design and the gene keys, and we looked at astrology, and we looked at angelic channels, and we brought all of that information together. And each month, we would make an album for the next month that was in alignment with that collective energy. And so these are the kind of albums that we're using in these sessions, and we do a lot of customized playlists and things like that as well. So
Amazing, mate. Well, it's suited to the own individual's life experience and life journey a lot of the time too, which is tailored to suit them. And yeah, I've ran workshops and I've taught various styles of yoga, but I've done sound healing, and I can observe the room and I can sort of tell where people are at, what they've experienced, or she's had trauma with this or he's had trauma with that or whatever. But eventually you get people back. But I believe one size doesn't fit all, and it's a matter of tailoring something to someone which could really, really suit them. Uh,
yeah.
but there are some common denominators with humans which are relevant across all beliefs, backgrounds, cultures, all those types of things, whether you're male, female, or whatever. And these binaural beats and these rhythms and so forth just seem to be able to do something to the body and the mind to stabilize things, in general.
Yeah. I think what's interesting is I always loved binaural beats, and I think when you're listening to them on headphones, they're powerful. But when you play them on a speaker like out loud, it's not really the same experience. And so I don't know if we've gone into that, but what we trademarked was the LTS method, which is basically using binaural beats and pure tones in combination with each other. And so we're using binaural beats as a carrier frequency, and then we're delivering pure tones. And those pure tones are customized based on the person that we're working with in those private coaching sessions. And so it's really neat because you're able to take a person's likes, like what types of instruments are your favorites, and then what frequencies have you worked with that you have seen breakthroughs with yourself, and then what issues are we really targeting in this session. And you're able to take all these data points and then create this customized frequency for this person, and something that is really um, dialed in to them specifically. And then they can also take this with them outside of the session, and then we destroy the files when we're done. Like we just get rid of it. We don't keep record of it, and we let them know when we're done with these sessions, you're the only person that's going to have this frequency, this song. And make a backup copy, whatever you want to do with it, but you have it. We're not using this with anyone else. And I think people really appreciate that. They appreciate knowing that this exclusivity is theirs, and it's something that they're holding that no one else on the planet has, and it was
Mhm.
made for them and put together for them. And it's a really intimate, conceptual, intentional sessions, and it's just a lot of fun to be a part of those with people.
Oh, mate, like, that's amazing. So you could take me into a room and sort of like explore things and see what works and what doesn't work and pull it together, and try and create something. And I think you could probably take a step further and look at an EEG or something where you can sort of see where things are, sort of where they're at, which would be wonderful because, yeah, if we can, if you're able to create things which can really resonate with people that they've got ownership of, that's an incredible offering, I would have thought for sure, you know.
Have you ever heard of the Aura rings? Those
Yeah,
rings
I've
that you wear
seen
that
I've
give
seen
you.
people getting around with them on it, particularly when I was in the US, every second person had one on. But yeah, I've explored
Yeah,
one
yeah.
myself. Yeah, yeah.
Well, my partner Fallon that you met earlier, she has one, and so she works for Dr. Axe here in the U.S. and he is a functional practitioner. A lot of people in the health field know who he is,
I've
but
heard of it, yeah.
um, she had she has about 67 clients a month that Fallon's working with, and so she has an Aura ring, and she sent me a snapshot. This was yesterday or the day before, and it showed all of her day was in the stress level. But at lunchtime, she made a little reel where she was listening to smile music, and it showed on the Aura ring that she dropped from the stressed level all the way down to the restored level. But then
Yeah.
as soon as she stopped the music, it went back to the stress because she went right back into work. And so she was like, wow, look at how much of a difference just pausing for 10 minutes and putting this music on made. And I started laughing. I said, "Yeah, it's so funny, you know." So, but it's like, she was using that in her day, and it was just neat to see that. And a lot of the people that we work with that have the body wearables, they are seeing very similar things where they're dropping into these restored states, and then as soon as they go back to work, it's going right back to the stress level. So then I said to them, "What if you could have the music playing while you were working in the background?" And you could just have that lightly playing, especially if you're not interacting with other people. You could put an earbud in, or something like that. And it's really interesting because people are like, oh yeah, I never thought of that. I'll have to try that out. So it's neat, these little tools and these little habits that we can get into that can make a big difference.
Yeah, regulate yourself. And yeah, I think modern society's doing a great job to keep people in a stress response. So we can consume and we can, look
Yeah.
outside ourselves consistently, but that's why I've been so big on meditation and trying to educate people around that because if they can commit to that on a daily basis, it gets them to that exact place where Fallon was at. But if we can use functional tools to assist with that too, that's a great combination. Because as we talked about before, that peaceful, calm state is who we are. We just got to re-engage with that more. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say that I think that organizations like yours are so important because I think we're getting pushed into this cookie cutter era where everyone thinks AI and apps and wearables are going to do everything for us. And I'm not a huge fan like devices that try to drop you into meditation. I'm just like, I really feel like maybe I'm just old school, but it's like I really feel like when we start having things do it for us, we really start losing connection to ourselves again, even further. And the whole purpose of this is to bring us back to a grounded state and connect us to ourselves. And so when we start relying on technology to do our mindfulness for us, I think it's fine to use the devices to get a gauge, and I think it's fine to justify to yourself like, oh, there really is a big difference here. I think I'm going to start pursuing this. But I think like it's interesting how much everything is trying to do it for us, or people think there's a magic pill instead of just eating healthy food, or whatever it is, right? And so I think that it's interesting that organizations like yours that are going out and bringing the awareness to people, that are giving them the resources and the tools, need to be supported now more than ever, because I think that the human connectivity part is I mean, we watched during COVID, like the separation and the isolation and the damage that caused. And we're seeing just more and more things in modern society that are moving in the direction of creating more separation, more isolation. So I think what you guys are doing with Outback Mind is just so important to engage people and bring awareness and resources to them.
Yeah, appreciate that. And yeah, look, it's not easy because I think the establishments and that are working in the opposite. to what we're trying.
Yeah.
We're trying to
Yeah.
keep simplicity to it all. And you're right, like, the wearables and the devices and that are great, but it's a pathway to getting to know yourself again and remembering who you really are beyond, you, Ian, and me, Aaron, and this, that, the other, this connectivity, which is supported and we have this wonderful opportunity to re-engage with that. But the more we're disconnecting from it, but we're not going to have the best life experience we can possibly have, and I really think, as you mentioned, like these are a pathway. I've always sort of like done practices, not always, but I've done practices which have taken me where I need to go. So my meditation teacher gave me a 1,000-day meditation practice to do every day, and I asked her for that, and she gave me a specific practice to do, but after the 1,000 days, I do it on my own anyway. Like it just becomes part of who I am. Um,
Yeah.
and that's what it is for people. It's okay, we're going to use these tools to help us get to a point of where I can regulate myself independently of outsourcing it, and getting
Yeah.
that calm, natural state. And it's interesting you talked about Neville Goddard. Quite a few people have been bringing him up lately, and I was engaged with the Zen Peacemakers, which I think he started recently on a call, and we had this very conversation about helping people rediscover themselves and rediscover that lightness which we've all got within us. Again, and that's why we've got such an important job to do is to help people, just become curious and rather distracted all the time with all the stuff that's constantly going to bombard us unless we're careful.
Yeah. I think I'll just say that I know I'm talking about Neville a lot. I really, I mean, I listen to Neville pretty much every night when I'm getting ready for bed. I listen to it in the morning when I'm in the shower. I really, he's such a refreshing energy that can, really help restore um things that seem hard or stagnant. You listen to him and you just realize like I got this. I can do this. It's like he's just so there's something about his voice that's just so charismatic and commanding, but also soft and compassionate at the same time. It's an interesting combination, but one of my friends, when I was going, this is probably in the last year, I went through a lot of changes and a lot of struggles. And, the way I was feeling was in my ego about it, where I was feeling like I've been through so much. Why do I have to go through this again? And my friend who's really into Neville, he said, it's asking you to look at the change. Like it's not there to be something negative. It's trying to shake up what's you're moving the furniture in the room, like you're trying to control it because you're like, I've been through enough, I don't want to move the room anymore, and it's saying like it's time to move the room. and
Yeah.
so and so it's interesting because it's just such a refreshing thing to hear someone say that your your hard work is not where the success is coming from. The success is coming from living in the end. That's what Neville wants you to do, is live from the end moment, meaning that if you're a struggling writer, you're not focusing on the struggle of being a writer and trying to use your little human brain to figure out how it's going to come to pass. He wants you to already just in conscious mind move to being a successful writer and envision what does that feel like to have the success already, and to do it so repetitiously that you are starting to make the transition into a different dimension where you are now that successful writer. And so when you tell that to an average person, they're like, I don't know, it sounds pretty crazy, Ian. And like, but as you start listening, you start connecting all of these metaphors, all of these dots, and you start seeing that things in your life start changing, more opportunities start coming in because you're living from the end. You're more hopeful, optimistic. You're more ready to engage. And I'll say this last thing is one of the things he says is, how many times have you said prayers but not made room for those prayers to be answered? Right.
Mm.
And that's something that I'm like, oh man, that's so good. Because I totally don't do that all the time. You know, like I want something to happen, but I'm not really making the space or putting the energy into that it's believable or that it's doable. I'm just in the struggle of why it's not happening. And so, yeah, I think everyone could really benefit from checking out Neville Goddard for sure. I mean, just amazing stuff.
Yeah, no, it's just funny. Like it's just been thrown up at me over the last couple of weeks. So there's something in this for me to explore. I think, most certainly. And I was going to ask you a question, and something I've become really curious of is I've been having some incredible dreams recently, and yesterday I was having one. I got woken up throughout that, but it's very vivid and. It included a second cousin of mine who was a young boy at the time and all these sorts of things. But there was messages in there, there's messages. And I haven't really explored these dreams and what they're showing me on my life journey, but there's wisdom in all this stuff that's coming to us, and to be able to, maintain that lucid state also throughout your daily living life, I think is very relevant too. But what's your observation with what our dreams are sort of, showing us and guiding us towards, and it probably relates to what you just mentioned in some way, shape, or form as well. Like, is that like we come into the world with nothing, we leave with nothing, and that's that complete surrender, which is really where the gifts actually are.
Yeah. I really believe that the dreams are another life, you know, and what I mean by that is part of it is instructions that are coming in. And it's, if you think about it, it's really the only way that the spiritual world could get our attention, because in the conscious waking hours, we're so distracted and there's so much moving and shaking and going on. And I'm not saying it's the only way, but I would say it's one of the primary ways that our ancestors, our spirit guides, and just, spirit is actually moving us and teaching us. And if you learn, like in the shaman philosophy, kind of the dream walker, where it's like these dream walkers are coming in and instructing us and teaching us in our dreams. It's just an interesting thing, and then the other side of that, which would be, am I leaving my body every night in an astral projection and going into different dimensions where these things that we think are dreams are actually taking place? And I would say, out of all the people, we've done hundreds and hundreds of personal coaching clients, and lots of the people talk about, when people come in, one of the first things I ask them is, how much are you listening to music? And a lot of the people who are ill, they say, I don't listen to music anymore. I don't have time for it. That's one of the first things. And then the other things that I'll ask in there is, like, how are your dreams? Are you remembering your dreams, or are you not remembering your dreams? And most of the time, people are in the I don't really dream, or I don't remember my dreams. And
Mm.
so that shows you two things are really cut off right there. Music is such an emotional connection. A lot of times, what I'm finding is the reason that people have stopped listening is because it pulls emotions up in them. And these people have traumas and they don't want to revisit, they don't want to cry, they don't want to go through that because it's overwhelming to them. And the reason is because they haven't learned some of the tools, the resources that they can use to cope and to overcome some of those blocks and stagnations, right? But the dreams is another thing. Like, are you shut down to communication from ancestors and spirit guides? Have you, like, I had a guy the other day who was dealing with alcoholism, and on the phone we were talking, and he said, I've just given up on God. I don't believe in God anymore. And so we spent some time on that, and we asked him, why do you feel like you have given up? And so he was going into all these struggles, all of these things, time and time again. And so I invited him to look at, I said, his mother had just passed away, and so we were kind of having this conversation about, he felt like he had let down his family because he didn't save her, that she wasn't able to make it. And I said, what if you looked at it a different way? What if you looked at your mother gave you a gift, you gave your mother a gift, and in turn she gave you a gift of compassion. I said, now think about how much you learned about the human spirit, the transition between life and death, and you got to be there for your mom where some people never get to say goodbye. I said they're just here like your mom passed or your dad passed, and you never got to say bye or spend time with them and have what you had. Not saying that that's easy. It was definitely hard, but there was a compassionate gift that was given to you that's not even fully blossomed yet. It's going to be years that this is going to grow inside of you, and it's going to blossom, and it's going to be used for some good in your life before you leave this place. And that's the only reason that this has happened, right? And so we went into this, and it helped him to see just a different perspective. Not saying that I'm right, not saying that you should look at it this way, but it's like, what if you looked at it this way? It's just an invitation that maybe you could be curious to see it from a different perspective. And I think that we don't, in life, it's so easy to get caught up in the surface of everything, finance, politics, all the different things. But below the surface, as you said, there are these kind people, these young people that say thank you for your kindness. And you're not really being told that on the surface. It's just you have to do a little investigating. So
Spot on. No, mate, I agree fully, and I always say this place that we're living in at the moment is really trying to give us signs of joy, and that consistently you just got to walk outside and you see a rose blooming and things like that, and there's so much wonder and awe, but we're so shut down from it. We have this little flicker in the middle of our hearts, and if that can start to expand more and more, then all of a sudden these things start to become reality, and we don't have to like run and hide from ourselves and all these sorts of things that they're showing us to do, or go to the football and be bombarded with stimulation. Or I went to an NBA game in America, and that was like far out.
yeah, I
So
bet so.
yeah, so yeah, it's just getting back to basics again and getting back to the simplicity of it all. And you've seen so many miraculous like changes in people's lives over the journey. It's given you the confidence to say, I've got to do more of this. And it's the same with me. I've done this, I walked away from the corporate life and everything because I just saw how much difference I was able to make when I helped people feel peaceful, and
Yeah,
back to this secret of who they actually really are beyond all the make believe. And what you touched on before is very relevant, because if you look at dreaming, you look at deja vu. I've had moments of deja vu, and it's like I'm where I'm meant to be, because it's like I've been here before, but it's like my soul is taking me on this journey, which we're not taught about. I haven't been taught about that, but it's been a realization. But you talk about ancients and talking about the dreaming and those sorts of things. It's actually very, very relevant and real. But this is literacy, which we're being disconnected from and blocked from. And
yeah,
I heard Greg Braden talking about, some stuff recently. And I don't go looking for this information, but it just comes at the right time, a bit like Neville Goddard is. But
yeah,
he talked about a lot of this wisdom and that which was destroyed. This is the sinister part of humanology, is a lot of this has been shut down and destroyed, and we've got a job to bring that back. We've got a job to bring that back. And I think we're just on the start of something pretty wonderful and special with regards to how we do that and how we get people out there curious enough to explore their unique gifts inside themselves, because everyone's got them. It's just about opening them up again, and getting back to having a wonderful life experience where you can start to engage with some of that great stuff that the universe and the planet's actually trying to show us more and more, rather than sort of focusing on the negative. And I think what you've described today, frequency, is getting us back. It's a pathway to get us back to that place, if that makes sense. And yeah, I'm looking forward to exploring more and seeing what we can do to be able to get more of this out in Australia because it's definitely needed, you know.
Yeah. I'm really excited to find some ways to partner together and to, I love everyone, from Tennille to Pete Evans to, Guy and just all the different people that I've met in Australia have just been so heartfelt, compassionate, big hearts, really nice people. And it's just been such a fascinating journey of just the network of people that I've been connected to, and I hope one day I get to come to Australia and do some events. That'd be really a lot of fun to do.
It'll happen.
Yeah,
It's no different than the US. Like the this country was built on hardship, and that's rolled downhill. If you look at my grandparents and that had to work, do all these things and the suffering and the survival and all that, but it's starting to free up in some ways. We've got so much abundance around us with regards to information technology and accessing information and that, but we've lost that disconnection, and
yeah,
that is really important. But yeah, look, a lot of hardship, a lot of chaos getting thrown up consistently, but keeping ourselves, and it's our own responsibility to do it, keeping ourselves balanced and grounded. You can get your way through any challenging situation and so forth because you know yourself more deeply than anyone else. But you also the superficial stuff sort of bounces off you more when you're in a state of acceptance and peace within yourself, I think. And yeah, the technology that you've got is a great pathway to help people get there, I think, for sure.
yeah, yeah, man. And I think that the biggest thing that we're using to interact with people is our personalities, which are just they're habits that we've developed into what we call a personality, right? But even more so is that intuition layer and that heart layer and that soul layer that lies beneath that a lot of us don't always put in the forefront. We're kind of hiding that because we're afraid of not being accepted or being rejected or not being worthy or good enough in some way. And I think like what's neat is frequency has the ability to strip all of that away, those facades. And, it's a very emotional, there's a lot of times where you can just play a song and people will cry. And you can tell that it's just, it's not language, it's not culture, it's just frequency, and the frequency is touching them and moving them. And I think that's really, sound and music is powerful, but when you put sound and music with frequency and you start getting a little scientific, just like we were talking about conscious breath and survival breath, you've got the conscious listening and the unconscious listening. And when you pair those together, conscious listening and conscious breath, there's this awareness that starts taking place, this connection. It's like almost like the hardware and the software boot together for the first time. And it's just really magical to watch that happen with people.
Are you familiar with the word sunya?
No.
Sunya is I think it's written in Sanskrit, but anyway, it means deep listening, and by deep listening, the secrets of life are revealed, you know.
Oh, okay.
Now personally, I've had I've had myself in deep meditative states, and you're so tuned in to what's going on, like in nature, and it's absolutely wonderful. And the secrets that you're given from nature consistently, and this is where the indigenous had it. They were able to really dial in and connect, and
Yeah.
they didn't need weather reports. They didn't need, all these other things getting in the road. They're able to deeply connect, but that's available to us. We've got to sort of quieten the noise a little bit and get back to this state of, wow, listen to the breath, listen to, to the sounds around us, and just remember who we are underneath it all. It's wisdom and that which we've all got. We just got to get back to that place again.
What that you just reminded me of a book I read years and years ago. Was it called Messages from Down Under? It was the Australian book about the walkabout. Is that the right name? Messages from
Yes,
Down Under?
possibly. Yeah, yeah. Be an
Yeah, yeah.
indigenous person that probably write that. Yeah, yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah. Very cool. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it's very sad that what's happened to Indigenous Australia, but I think it's resurging and emerging again, possibly. If you look at Robbie Holtz, who wrote the book Secrets of Natural Healing or Indigenous Healing, or one of the other natural or Indigenous, that her husband was healed by an Indigenous tribe here.
Oh
Just
wow.
by getting back to some of the basics like you were able to describe with the work you're doing. And
Yeah.
he was a quadriplegic, and he came over from the US in a wheelchair and left walking again. So it's
Wow.
definitely possible for us to look at things a bit differently and get back to the real core of it all. And these cultures have got that, but a lot of it's been blocked and destroyed. But we can actually absolutely get back there again. We can absolutely get back there.
Yeah.
It's super important. It's more needed now than ever. I think that we do need.
Yeah.
Um,
That's beautiful.
yeah, yeah. So I think it's just a start, mate. I think we're going to have a lot more conversations around this and do what we can to be able to help more Australians, in general to engage with your work and that. How can people like have a look at what you're doing and maybe some of the stuff that you've done previously and what's coming forward for people here, moving into, the later part of 2026 and beyond?
So listeningtosmile.com is our website. So there's some information there. There's testimonials, there's some samples of music that they can hear on listeningtosmile.com. On our YouTube channel, we have, Instagram, we have some, fun information on there, but also YouTube. Both of those, you can just look up Listening to Smile on both of those. And on YouTube, there's actually 20-minute playlists that you can go through that are free that people can sample. Some of it is like mid-tempo music and shamanic drumming. Some of it is like deep meditations or sleep music. So there's some samples of playlists that they can listen to. And then on our website, it's just info at listeningtosmile.com. If people have questions, they can reach out and we try to answer as many people as we can that send messages of, asking questions about things. And then we have programs like for practitioners, if they want to use the music in a commercial setting, we show them options of being able to use it, but also monetizing it, creating multiple revenue streams that supports them in their work, and then gives them tools to give out to their community. So we have a couple of different ways that people can interact with us.
Yeah, amazing, mate. Like, thank the universe for you having that moment when you were running between second and third base, because if that had happened, you'd be probably playing
Yeah.
for the New York Jets and not doing this important work. So we've got enough baseballs out there. We need more people doing this.
Yeah, well, it's funny. There's a movie back in the 80s, like late 80s. It was called Mr. Destiny, and it was about Jim Belushi. Uh, he didn't hit a game-winning home run in one of the games that he was playing in baseball, and he was always talking about it in his life. And so this angel comes back to him and says, "Do you really want to hit that game-winning home run to see what your life was like? If would have been like if you would have done it?" And he's like, "Yeah, I want to go back." So he goes back and they show him what his life would be like. And it's funny because I was watching that with my partner Fallon, and she's like, "Do you ever wonder what it would be like if you went to the pros and played baseball instead of doing what you're doing now?" And I said, "Yeah, I think about it all the time." And I don't think I would have ever woke up spiritually at all. I don't think I would have ever, because I can't imagine the types of money that was being talked about when I was younger. If I would have made that type of money being 19 and 20 years old, I don't think I would have ever. I don't know if I would be alive right now, to be honest. Because I just don't think my personality would have been able to handle the excess of all the things that would have been thrown at me. And I don't think I was mature enough to handle that. And so it's interesting to see that turn and how different my life is, and to be thankful, even though I'm not famous or rich or whatever. It's like I'm much more happy in the life that I have. And it's just it's a neat diversion of the path that ended up being something that was much better for me. I just couldn't see it at the time.
spot on. Everything happens for a reason, and that's the issue we have with, say, the mental health space is people who hit these big chaotic moments, and it can either be an emergency or it can be an emergence. It
Yeah.
really can. If you see the ability to, okay, this is teaching me something, but if you're a 17-year-old baseballer, you don't. Um,
Hmm.
Put all your time and effort into that, but it's like, oh shit, life's taking me somewhere else now.
Yeah.
I'm just enjoying that journey, of where things are going for you. I think's really key. So that's sort of yeah, that's what we've got to start to have people help people through challenging situations, so they actually understand that it's an opportunity for them to go somewhere else, which they may never even explored or even known.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think I'll just say this last part is I think one of the things that I've seen the most in group sessions and in the private coaching is that a lot of people just need to be heard,
Yes.
and it's to be heard in a way that they don't feel dumb or small, that you're meeting them on their level and telling them that it can get better, And I think that for me, the reason I'm saying that is for me, frequency was always that friend, that would come in the room and just brighten the day because no matter what kind of day I was having, I could always find some type of music that I wanted to connect with, and it would make me think of or have a different vibration than what I was currently carrying. And so it's always been a lifeline. But when you add the frequency and all the science and all the awareness behind it, it's another beast that is just such a great tool for motivation, moving stagnant energy and helping people to get clear, grounded, more clarity. And so I'm excited to share it with people.
Back to feeling themselves again. Back to who they are beyond all the other stuff. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and
Yeah.
make space for it to happen, I guess. That's the most important thing. So, geez, Ian, I've really enjoyed this chat. We will definitely be having more of these podcasts because yeah, very necessary, and there's lots of pathways we could have went down in that conversation. And yeah, bro, I really hope that we can catch up soon. And obviously, people listening to this, look up Listening to Smile on social media and the website. And yeah, mate, the best yet to come.
Thanks so much for having me, man. Hope you have an amazing rest of your day.